Hey everybody, thanks for coming out. I know Dennis will be up here in a little bit to give us a presentation. Welcome to Leading Edge. I don't know if you know anything much about us. We're a consulting company. We're really just a bunch of geeks who like to go in and solve complex business problems. We'll let you know that if you're interested, feel free to go out to our website, check us out. You'll learn a lot about us, and we also have a lot of jobs open right now. So if you're looking, or you know somebody that's looking, feel free to check out the website, check out our jobs that are open. We're always looking for good QA people, good developers, project managers, VAs, and pretty much anybody that's smart and fun to work with. So feel free to check us out, and I'll go ahead and let you talk to Dennis. Thanks. You want to dance?
Later.
Okay.
Got quiet. Okay, so this is the black screen. Okay, this is getting promising. Okay, so welcome everyone to Leading Edge. Glad to see you all are here tonight. My name is Dennis Whalen. I am a QA Solutions Lead and a Solutions Architect here at Leading Edge. We'll be talking about performance testing with Jmeter tonight. So that's kind of me. I'm curious, or is everybody like QA for the most part? If you're QA, raise your hand. If you're not, go like this. Okay, gotcha. Developer, just interested. Okay, cool. So does everybody have performance testing experience? Jmeter experience? Okay, good. So when there's really hard questions, you're going to help me. Yeah. And if you can't help me, Terry will definitely try. So, good. Okay, cool. So tonight, a few goals here. Basically just to increase the general awareness around performance testing, performance requirements, and the importance there. Talk a little bit about performance requirements, because to test, it's always good to have some requirements first. I'm going to demo some basic Jmeter features and talk about including Jmeter in your CI/CD pipeline. So, awareness. I'm sure most of you remember the rollout of the Affordable Care Act website. Signed into law in 2010, went live in October of 2013. And it was a government, or is a government website to allow people to sign up for health care. So, on day one, the website crashed within 2 hours of its launch. A bunch of statistics there. That bottom one is one I didn't know. Interesting. Of all of 2.8 million people, lots of help desk calls, 6 people were able to submit an application and select a health plan. So that's not an awesome thing. I would think maybe their performance testing probably leaves a little bit to be desired there. The fallout of that, there was a government shutdown immediately after the rollout. So that, I don't know if shutdowns are planned, but there was obviously an issue there because the result of that was it was difficult to get things moving. It took 2 months to get the site functional 90% of the time. You can see the dev cost went from $464 million to $844 million. Not an awesome situation. More local situation, more close to my heart. I have a stepson, and we're trying to register him for summer camp. And we know that it's very competitive to get into camp. It's basically first come, first serve. The website comes on at 6 a.m. All these crazy moms and dads are out on the website trying to get registered, and it fills up really quickly. Well, my wife was out, this was a couple weeks ago. The website, she couldn't get logged in. She would get stuff added to her cart. It would boot her out. It was a hot mess. she was not the only one that this happened to. She ended up never getting enrolled. So this was kind of the email, and I think it doesn't really describe the pain and agony, but this is kind of a local example of a site that had a huge spike in usage. And the planning and testing for that site probably wasn't ideal, and hopefully next year and going forward they're going to address that. So that was the email we got that did not make anyone feel better. So kind of to summarize these two examples probably is it's broke, and that's kind of what we kept saying when we were using the website that morning. So let's talk about the different types of testing. Functional testing. Functional testing describes what the application does. If you're involved in QA, I'm sure you're involved with functional testing, validating the application does what the requirements describe. So it's the what. So there's functional requirements, and then obviously testing is validating the application conforms with those requirements. It kind of is in line with the test pyramid, with the unit tests, integration test, API and UI, and really the functional tests start kind of at the API and UI level, I'd say. Non-functional requirements don't describe what, but they describe how the application operates. So there's different types of non-functional requirements. Here's an example of some of them, but performance is one, security, reliability, scalability, etc. There's a lot of ability type requirements that are considered non-functional. And of course, non-functional testing verifies the application conforms with the non-functional requirements. Makes sense, right? So to do performance testing, you need some requirements to validate your application is addressing those requirements. So when you look at performance tests, there's a number of types of tests. There's different terminology for these tests. I kind of tried to list some things that I've heard in the past, but typically what I've heard load test is when you apply an average load. So again, the requirements would describe what average load is for the site. There's also peak load, which would be the requirements for this is the worst we think it's ever going to get. So that's load testing. Stress testing or capacity testing is basically testing and continuing to add workload until the application breaks. And breaks means you start getting errors, you start getting unacceptable response time, etc. So that's
500 errors.
yes, 500 errors, absolutely. That type of stuff. So why do you do that? Well, to get an understanding of how the application behaves and does it recover from those situations. It's an interesting type of test because its peak already describes the worst it's ever going to get, but then we do stress tests. So obviously it's a way of reducing risk because really you can say this is peak, but it's one of those things where it's really hard to know for sure. If you have a legacy app, you might have some insights into that, but I would say stress testing is just kind of trying to cover yourself and understanding what's going to happen when things go wrong. Like there's a huge increase in load or popularity of one of the products we're trying to sell. Spike testing is where you test like kind of like what I described, that 6 a.m. thing. It's not like a long load, but it's a spike. So there's a huge hit. Maybe there's a news story about your company and you have a news site out and it gets hit, like there's a link to a Drudge Report or CNN or something, and your site gets hit a lot quickly. So you want to do spike testing to verify your application can deal with that. And then another type is, I've always called it endurance testing. Other people call it soak testing, but typically what I've seen is it's running at the average load for a long duration. But the average and peak are typically shorter tests, like 30 minutes to an hour to see how the application reacts under those loads. And the endurance and soak test is more of a 8-hour type test. Let's see how the application, because things might look good in the first hour, but in the 7th and 8th hour things can go wrong. So that's kind of the point of those. So we talked about, or I mentioned performance requirements. I would say this is kind of an example of some requirements. So what this table lists here, these are kind of in the transaction column. These are business transactions for like estates, automobile website. So what you can renew your plate online, you can renew your driver's license, you can get a duplicate registration, duplicate title, you can renew your driver's license. I think I said that twice, and it's listed twice. Anyway, ignore that. So there's a number of business transactions, and one thing you'll notice is this is not all the business transactions that that website deals with. With performance testing, you are going to test a subset of the application, and you're going to work with the business and the client to understand which ones make sense. This is not functional testing. You want to pick like the heavy hitters and the super critical transactions, and that's what you're going to performance test. So for example, obviously renew plate. Looking at these metrics, this is the most popular transaction, which kind of makes sense. So you have your transactions there on the left, and then you have a definition of average peak stress. So the 150 is the number of transactions in a half an hour, for example. Under peak, they're going to do 300 of those in a half an hour, for example. So that's what those numbers mean, and obviously they increase as you go from average peak to stress. And then duration, I actually do not remember what, oh, that's the duration test. So you'll notice these numbers, this is the duration test that runs for 8 hours. So you define your required load for that test too. In this example, it just matches average, because that's usually how it works, is duration is typically the average workload. So that's the number of transactions, so that's all cool. The other thing you need to have is some expected response times, or required response times, I guess. So you can see down at the bottom there, in this example.
Duration for what?
Duration is the duration. Endurance, it should be endurance. That's why I was struggling with that. That's the endurance test. That header should say endurance. So it's the 8-hour test. Remember I said these tests are like, these first three are like a half hour to an hour. The endurance test is running for like 8 hours to see how the application responds over a longer period of time.
The last column duration is 150 minutes.
That's the number of transactions.
Oh, number of
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, so all those numbers represent number of transactions in a half an hour or in 5 minutes. Whatever you want it to be, that it's a number of transactions. So good question, thanks. Then response time, you got to have requirements around response time. So in my example here, I said the requirement is we need response time less than 2 seconds, 95% of the time, under peak workload. So I'm making up the requirements. That's my requirement. Do you have a question?
Just again, I'm just trying to frame this with this. So like with if I was testing an airplane, there's flight simulator, there's actually a test pilot for the plane. So there's the realism versus the safety of the other, something like that. And then I guess the other thing is in this context, you could have totally developed software, but you're just testing with this thing along.
Yeah.
So it seems like a hardware thing more than a software thing.
Yeah, it can be, but there's plenty of software. There's performance issues are caused typically by software issues. I mean, yeah, you can throw more hardware at it, but sometimes that won't fix it. And sometimes if it does fix it, it's super duper expensive. But I mean, what I found is performance issues are caused by software issues. So, but yeah, I mean, it's
there could be multiple reasons, maybe like database collection or hardware or
yes.
like the load balancer, network. So we have to figure out the bottleneck.
Yes.
So to the software, there could be some some Java statements or whatever. There could be part of the code.
Yeah.
That will be calling too many calls.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
bottleneck can be a very reason.
You're right. Yeah, I agree. It could be. So does that make sense?
Okay, so I'm starting to understand. So is it, when you say the software issues, code versus it's just trying to
Yeah. So let's say we're a team and we developed this healthcare website, right? So we do functional testing. Everything works perfectly from a single user perspective as it's supposed to. The client wants to make sure when it's working under load that it continues to function with good response times, no 500 errors, things like that. For the purpose of this performance testing is to validate that's the case. When there's problems, the root cause, there's a lot of possibilities, and that's part of the work with testing is diving in and figuring out where those bottlenecks
What
are.
happens is when you do a load test, you have to engage all the teams,
Absolutely.
You're doing the check test. Then, the application interacts with, for example, I work in a retail application, it works with, document interacts with the warehouse management application, with virtual store, with database. So you have to engage all the teams, they will be monitoring their server. And if we are getting errors, they will be watching their servers and let us know.
Absolutely.
So say like, you have to engage a lot of teams, all the teams.
Good?
Good.
Okay. Thanks for the question. So you'll notice both of these requirements are talking about 2 seconds 95% of the time, 5 seconds 99% of the time. So a lesson learned, it's a very bad idea to say there's a requirement that happens 100% of the time, because typically, no matter how awesome your website is, during one of these tests, you're going to have an outlier that makes your 100% metric fail. So I would recommend pushing for requirements 95%, 90%, 99%, get an understanding with everyone accepting the fact that 100% of the time it's hard to promise anything. Test environment guidelines. So we want to test in an environment that's going to be similar to production, right? We don't, for example, another lesson learned, we don't want to test with a super small database because performance may chug along, and when it goes to production against a real production-sized database, there's a bunch of timeouts accessing data. You want a production-sized environment, or similar to production as you can get. And again, database size. I mentioned database because, from my experience with performance testing, there's usually some work on the database side. That's kind of my experience. But ultimately, you want an environment similar to production. So, what's the value of performance testing? Identify application performance issues, hopefully early. I know sometimes with performance testing it gets put off till the end, and with Agile, a lot of times we're doing continuous integration, but we kind of don't do performance testing in there because we know at the end of the 2-week sprint maybe we're not going to deploy. So sometimes performance testing gets pushed off, and the longer it gets pushed off, obviously, the more potential that performance problems are building up. So ideally, and we're going to talk about this some more later, you can get some performance testing involved in your whole CI pipeline. When code gets merged, there's some performance testing. What else? It's going to verify the application is effectively using resources. So we may find that it's meeting the response time requirements, but with the cloud infrastructure, we're not set to 3 web servers and 6 app servers. Typically, it's an elastic situation where we add workload in a cloud situation anyway, or we add hardware as it's needed. So you might find that you have an application that's responding well, but it's costing you a fortune for your cloud resources. So performance testing will help identify stuff like that too. And finally, you got to verify that the application meets the performance requirements. So I want to talk just briefly about how a browser works. You guys already know this. And then how tools like Jmeter do performance testing. So this is a browser. There's JavaScript. There's client-side script that runs on the browser typically. There's a request that goes to the server. There's a response that goes back. Everybody knows that, right? With load testing, you're not testing anything on the client. So you are simulating the work of a browser. The tools like Jmeter and other performance tools are not a browser. So if you have a performance issue like with your JavaScript, like when you click the scroll button, it's taking 5 minutes to scroll down to the next page, there's no server activity going on. That's not the root cause. There's JavaScript issues, client-side JavaScript issues. That is not what these tools are for. These tools are for generating load that represents a realistic situation against the server and seeing what happens, verifying we meet the requirements. So the request obviously is getting driven by those requirements, those average peak load scenarios. This guy's going to send a bunch of work to the application, and then it's also going to look at the responses and verify the response times, the return codes, stuff like that. Make sense? So some popular tools for performance/load testing. I actually kind of Googled some of this. I'll tell you what I have experience with. I've done some work with Jmeter. I think Gatling is kind of the new kid on the block that's kind of hot. I would like to research some more into that. I've worked with LoadRunner. I've worked with Visual Studio. I haven't had any experience with 3 of those, I think, but there's plenty of other tools out there. But I just want to mention, obviously, Jmeter is not the only kid on the block. So, with that being said, it is the only kid on the block tonight, so I'm going to talk about Jmeter. So, what is Jmeter? Raise your hand if you've used Jmeter or have experience with it. Okay, cool. That's cool. So it's an open source tool. I'm going to show it here in a minute, and I'm going to be talking about, and previously I've been talking about testing websites. I'm going to continue talking about that type of performance testing. Jmeter tests a variety of protocols. You can see the list there: FTP, databases via JDBC, mail, etc., etc. But those top 2 are kind of, I'd say, probably where it's used the most, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about tonight. Okay. So some terminology, vocabulary of Jmeter, and I think I'm going to show most of these things. There's a test plan. So basically, and I'm going to show this, when you open a Jmeter test, that is a test plan. Underneath the test plan, you can have a thread group. You can have multiple thread groups, but basically that describes the number of users. And then underneath the thread group, you're going to have requests. So like if you have an application that makes 10 requests to the server, there's going to be 10 samplers under that thread group. I'm going to show all this. There's timers that allow you to introduce think time to represent kind of a real user, delay, sleep type of thing. There's listeners for reporting. There's configuration elements. Preprocessor allows you to take some custom action before each sampler request, before each request to the server. Postprocessor allows you to take a custom action on the response. Assertion, you guys know what that means? It's like you can define some criteria to identify what a past test is. And then etc., which is a bunch of stuff I'm not going to talk about, but there is a lot more going on with Jmeter than just these areas. I'm just going to kind of touch on these briefly in the demo, but there's a lot more to it than just those things. I'm not going to install Jmeter. I decided to install it before I got here, but it's very simple to install. On Windows, you just extract the zip file. You add the bin folder to your path. You type Jmeter at the command line, and it starts. On the Mac, I used Homebrew. Brew install Jmeter. Once it's installed, you can check the version, Jmeter-V from the command line. To start it, you just type Jmeter at the command line, and you should be good to go. And I'm going to show that right now. Okay. So, start with, I'm going to start Jmeter. Oh, yes, I can. I know, I knew. I can barely see it, so I'm not sure how to do that. Is there, you guys know? Say again? This is a Mac.
Terminal, upper left. Preference.
Yeah, I think there's a way to make everything bigger than I'll tell you what, I'm just starting Jmeter at this point, so you probably don't need I'm just typing Jmeter in the command line. So let's get Jmeter open, let's see if we can get that. And also I will point out Terry is very lonely up here. I understand why there's reluctance to sit here, but
there's other seats, not next to it.
Yeah, that's true. There are other seats not next to him. Good point. Okay, so let's see. Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to move up if you can't see.
Okay.
All right. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to build a quick performance test for a Blaze Meter website, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Blaze Meter here in a bit. But Blaze demo. Blaze demo, don't get me wrong. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to do a quick, I'm going to just manually create a quick test for just the home page of this site. So it's blazedemo.com. So I'm going to jump over here into Jmeter. And this is the test plan. I know I need to make that larger. Sorry. Hope that's slightly visible. So this is the test plan. First thing I'm going to add is, if you remember from that one slide, I'm going to add a thread group where it's going to define the user. So for now, I'm just going to have one user for this test. So the thread group defines the user. Within the thread group, I'm going to add a sampler. And you can see in this dropdown, hopefully, the different types of controls you can add under the thread group. So there's the pre and post processor, timer, assertion, etc. But I'm going to go ahead and add a sampler, because you remember the sampler is a request to the server. So you can see there's a number of sampler requests there. I'm choosing an HTTP request. So now I've got an HTTP request. At this point, all I do is enter the protocol, the URL, and that I've built my request, basically. The final thing I'm going to do for this first demo is I'm going to add a report so I can, when I run it, I can see what happened. So I am going to add a listener. So a listener is a way of defining reports, logs, etc. So there's a number of pre-built listeners. I'm just going to do this view results tree. All this is going to do is display the results of the test. So if you look in here, I've got a thread group with one user. I've got a request to go to the blazedemo.com website, and I've got a report that's going to show me the results. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
So server name, you have again HTTP.
You're right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I was doing that to demonstrate what happens when you make a mistake, but you nobody believes that. Why? Okay, and I'm also I'm gonna bump up the users. Let's just do 10 users. Just for fun. Feeling brave, right? So I got a request. 10 users are gonna hit that website one time. That's a pretty basic test. Click this green arrow to do run. I'm not gonna save it. Say no. The test is already done. Those are the results. I'm going to clear that. Okay. I'm going to clear those results and run it again. No, I don't want to save. So you can see the requests as they came through. This is a super simple test. 10 users hitting one site all at once. But just to give you an idea of what Jmeter is, how you create tests, super basic. Not a useful test, but you can see in the results, you can see at each individual request, you can see the response code, you can see what request was the data that was sent, and you can see the data that came back. So, super basic test, right? Okay, cool. So, next thing I want to demo is the concept of recording, because typically you're not going to go in there and manually enter all those requests. Now, depending on the situation, you may do that. But with a website, you can do recording that's going to capture all of the requests that go to the server, and you can use that as a starting point when you're building up your test. So I'm going to show you how that works. First, I want to show you this website super quick. It's only like four pages. But you select a departure city. You select a destination city. Yeah, I can make that larger. You find flights. From there, so these are all the flights that meet my criteria. Notice it says from Philadelphia to Berlin. I'm going to do an assert, looking for that text here in a bit. I'm I'm going to choose that flight. I'm going to put my name and info. Visa. This is not going to work without a valid credit card. You have a credit card I can use?
Oh, yeah, let me read that off.
Yeah. That's right. It does work without a valid credit card. And then purchase flight. Boom. That's it. So that's kind of a business transaction for making this, for scheduling this flight. So now I'm going to show you how to create a performance test for that. The way I'm going to do that is going to be kind of interesting. I find it good. So I'm going into Firefox. I'm going to go to blazdemo.com. You can see I have the website there, so everything's cool there. Now I'm going to jump back over here in Jmeter and start this whole recording process. So to do that, I'm going to say, I'm going to create a new test. I'm done with this guy, so I'm going to create a new test. Actually, I'm going to do templates. So I'm going to use this recording template. Jmeter comes with a number of templates that help you get started with whatever type of performance test you're creating. I'm creating one that's going to record some web actions. So I'm selecting the recording template. Okay? So what this is going to do is it's going to capture all the web traffic coming from Jmeter, and it will capture those as sampler requests within the thread group. So you can see right now, nothing up my sleeve. There's no request in this thread group currently. So what I need to do to make this work with Jmeter, to make this work with Firefox, is to change the proxy for Firefox. So I'm going to make all the requests from Firefox go through Jmeter before they go to the web. Trust me. So to do that, I need to go into Jmeter. Firefox. Preferences. I'm going to change my network setting. And I'm going to do this manual proxy configuration. So everything is going to go through a proxy server on my local host machine, port 8888. So basically what's going to happen, I'm going to change that. So now I'm done with that. So now when I go to the Blaze demo site, what happens? Nothing. Because I haven't started that proxy server yet in Jmeter. So I'm going to jump over to Jmeter. This is basically the proxy server. You can see it's running, maybe you can, maybe you can't, on port 8888. So I'm going to click Start. It gives me just some information about the certificate. But now the proxy server is started. It is listening for activity on port 8888. So if I do this right, this is, I'm going to move this out of the way. This is kind of an important thing. Okay, so this is the website. This is Jmeter. Okay, so I'm going to go to the first thing I'm going to do is go to the home page. So if you'll notice, when I did that under the recording controller, I now have a request that wasn't there before. So now I'm going to select San Diego, New York. I'm going to do find flights. And if you watch this recording controller here, you will see there is a new sampler request. And so based on the action I took in the browser, it is recording that behavior. So I'm going to choose a flight. There's another one. So now I have purchase. And then finally, I'm going to click purchase the flight. I don't think I clicked that. I'm going to click purchase the flight. There's my confirmation here. And here's my confirmation within Jmeter. So I did. So now let's kind of just jump in and look at these individually for a minute. These should look familiar. Here's a sampler request going to the Blaze demo URL, doing a GET request. This next guy, the reserve, I'm going to expand this. It's making a post request to reserve. You can see there's a couple of parameters that are being passed, and that is what I chose from the dropdown. I chose San Diego, I chose New York. When I clicked submit, it passed those up in the form, so that got recorded in Jmeter, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of, so you can see there's like four options that got passed for the purchase. And then you can see, I was hoping to show Terry's credit card info here, but anyway, you can see the information that I use. I just chose Visa and I'm on there. So I was able to quickly create a test that I can run this right now. I can say 100 users run this right now. I can run this for 30 minutes. I can run this for 8 hours. But the work is done as far as this goes. Now, this also is probably not a super realistic test. There's more things that need to be added to this, and that's what I want to demo for you real quick. The good news is I'm not gonna do it manually. I kind of already have one. Created. So it's basically the same thing with those 4 steps: reserve, purchase, confirmation, with a few more bells and whistles that I just wanted to show you real quick. On the left side here, you'll see user-defined variables. This is a way for you to define variables that you're going to reuse in your script. So we have a couple of variables here. The host, which is blazemeter.com, and the scheme. That's going to be used, that's going to be parameterized so it can be referenced in other steps of the script. We have this thing called a request defaults, and you can see it has a protocol which is referencing those user-defined variables, and it has a server name or IP that is also referencing the user-defined variables. So this thing's using those variables, but it's also a default. So if I create a request, I don't have to keep repeating the server name and the protocol in every single one. If in the individual request, I don't mention that information, it will use what's in the default. So it's just kind of a time-saving thing. So you don't have to keep repeating yourself, and if you want to change it, you can change it in one place instead of 700 places. Cookie Manager helps Jmeter deal with all the management of cookies, just like a real browser would do. The thread group. Let's take a look at what I have here. I got 10 users. It's going to ramp up for 10 seconds. So ramp up means over 10 seconds, we're going to go from 0 users to 10 users. And then it's going to run for 30 seconds. Okay? So here are my 4 transactions. I've named these a little bit better. So you got go to home page, click find flights button, click choose flight, click purchase. So if you expand one of these, again, we've got the home page, but now I have an assert going on. So when I go to the home page, I want to assert, when I get the response back, it says welcome to the Simple Travel Agency. So I'm validating that I'm on a good page. I'm not just on a page that says your page invalid or something like this. So the assertions are where you can validate the response of what comes back. So the home page, that's all I'm doing is just verifying. It looks like I'm on the home page. For the find flights, a couple things I want to show you there. Instead of having hard-coded cities, so the from and to city, instead of having hard-coded cities, I am pulling those from a file. So this is kind of test-driven type testing, so parameterized testing, so I don't have hard-coded values. So departure cities, it allows me to define data that I can reference in my test. So you can see Portland, Boston. This is just a CSV file that I created. Same thing with the arrival cities. You look at what's in the file, it's just data that I created. But the key here is that in the request, it's referencing that parameter. So every request is going to pull a random city from city and a random to city. So we don't just keep asking for the same stuff over and over again. Randomizing the data, not using the same data over and over again is important in performance testing because things may look super good once it gets cached. And if you try a different piece of data, you get all sorts of performance issues. So you want to kind of keep that from happening by making your data a bit random. So that's where we reserve. We also have an assertion there. If you remember on that page, it said flights from New York to Sao Paulo. That was the text. So now I have an assert that says I'm looking for flights from departure city, the parameter, to arrival city. So again, I'm not looking for hard-coded data. I'm looking for what's in that test file and what's being used by that particular request. Let's see, what else is interesting here. So this is the after you, when you get to the point that you have confirmed your flight, I'm going to look for a message that says your flight from A to B has been reserved. Again, that is parameterized. And then I'm going to, then I'm going to click the confirmation. Again, a response assertion. I want to verify I see text that says, thank you for your purchase today. Now, the reporter didn't do any of this. I went in, I took the bare bones recordings and went in and tweaked it to make sense to me, to do the validation that I thought was important. So recording is a great first step. It helps you understand your site, but there's going to be work on top of that. So those are the 4 steps. A few other things to point out. There is something here called think time. And if you remember, I mentioned that earlier. Basically, this is going, since it's outside of the individual 4 steps, it's going to apply to all the steps. If you want to simulate a user, you don't want to just click through all the pages super quick. A user doesn't do that. A user clicks, and I put 1 second just so you guys don't have to sit here and watch a long-running test. But typically, a user will be, if it's me, I may be there 30 seconds reading the details. But if you want to if you get requirements that say, I want 400 concurrent users doing work, if you don't have think time, you're going to be throwing a lot more load at your server than if you have realistic think time. Think time is, where do you get that? Again, that may be a thing you need as part of a requirement. Let's define what the expected think time is on these pages. For this test, I'm just trying to show you the concept of think time. So there's 1 second of think time between each step. For every single test, I'm doing an assert to verify we're getting a 200 back. And finally, I want to look at the response time, right? So I'm doing an assert to verify the response. The duration of the request and response is less than 3 seconds. So again, that's driven from the requirement. And then I have a couple of reports here. And I'm going to show you a couple of reports this time. So I'm going to go ahead and run this guy. I think it runs for like 30 seconds or something like that. So you can see, if you want to see the results real time, I'm in the view results tree. To see how it's scrolling, I don't know if you can see that scroll bar, but this test is running, and I will know it's done when this gray arrow turns green. So again, I'm generating a bunch of load against this website. I've got 10 concurrent users going through those transactions, randomly picking stuff from the dropdown, thinking between 1 second between each request, and I'm done. So that's the results in the view results tree. There's a bunch of reports. I'm not going to show all of them. I'm only going to show these 2 actually, but this is kind of detailing the steps. It shows you your average response time, your median, your 90% line, which means 90% of the time you are lower than this number. And that, again, kind of ties back to your requirements. We said 90% of the time we need to be here, 95% we need to be here. These tools provide that information. So you can validate your, once you have built up an accurate test that meets the load, you've got these reports to verify you're meeting the requirement. Yes, sir.
So the origin destination example, you got 10 cities, there's 100 cells, 1,000 cities, 1,000 cells. So is there a way to automate this runs an increasingly larger file and just starts in
An increasingly larger file.
well, so the idea is, the first thing I run is 100 destination, the matrix is 100 cells.
Combination.
Right, but then you automate 6, 7, and run it once at this 7 times 100, 4 times 1,000, 4 times 1,000.
Are you talking about combinations, or are you talking about number of users?
Well, I'm saying when people are looking up stuff, like origin destination,
right.
so matrices get exponentially larger as you
Sure.
size.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this example, if you look at those drop downs, there's only like 6 or 8 choices there. Probably a more realistic example would not use hard-coded data in a CSV file. It would probably have extracted, like there would have been a process that would have extracted all the valid cities into a file or somewhere into a database table. And this test would read from there. But ultimately, there's a limit to the number of things that show up in each dropdown in this example. So all this test is doing is randomizing the various choices.
Saying, you know, if you have 500 current users and all accessing some pretty large features that you look up. I'm just curious, just the permutation, how it's sort of, how you sort of manage testing out loud.
Yeah, I mean, so this is going to work the same with one user as the way this guy is, as with 500 users. There's a limited number of permutations because there's 6 in one drop down and 8 in the other, so there's a limited combination. The way this guy runs is he is randomly pulling a source and destination. So if there's 10 concurrent users or 500, kind of the process at this point is the same. I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
If I can add something. So you can set up counters in JMeter, so you know what loop numbers your user's on. You can also set up a Java sampler in there so that you can run in and pull in different files or CSVs, or you can cut down, like I want the first 10 rows of that CSV, the next, and you overwrite those global variables that are being set. You can set basically instance variables that overwrite for each user as they go in. So maybe start off with 10 and rank up to 12.
Okay, now, that's such a good question, and I forgot where I'm at. Okay, I think I'm done with that demo. That's one now. So, good. So, I'm going to jump back over here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so one more. So the next demo, the next demo is going to be super quick, but when I'll show you this in a second. But when I type Jmeter on the command line and it opened up, you will see text that says, "Don't use GUI mode for load testing," and you know they mean it because they put an exclamation point followed by a comma. Only for test creation and test debugging. So just using that UI, the point of that UI is to build your test. When you're running under load, you're not running that from a UI. You're going to run that from a command line. So Jmeter gives you a way to do that. So you can see for load testing, you want to use the non-GUI mode. So see that Jmeter-n, which means non-GUI. -t is the name. Then you follow that by the name of the Jmeter script. That's demo.jmx. And then you give it a log file name. So I'm just going to show you how that works.
Is it for running on a Mac machine or Windows machine?
Doesn't matter. Although the forward slash backward slash screwed me up. But no, this is just running from the command line. Yeah. I'm going to jump over here real quick. Okay, so this will take a brief moment. While this is running, this will take a second. It's just running that same demo, that same thing I just ran through the UI is going to run that, so it's going to take like a minute. While that's running, the tool I'm in now is called Visual Studio Code. It's just a way for me to kind of manage my files. Demo3.jmx is one of the files that I have in here. Like, I just want to show you what those files look like. Like, if I click Demo3 over here in the content page, you can see these files are saved as XML files. So you could technically go in here and edit these. They wouldn't be very pretty to deal with. So, but the point is, with Jmeter, you're using the UI. This is the format it's saving. So here is the file that represents that Demo3. So you can see there's a bunch of info. And I'm going to make a change, a minor change, and show you kind of how that gets represented in the file. But in the end, all these Jmeter files are XML files. That's what they are. So I'm going to keep these in source control. I push this stuff up to Git. So that's going to be useful when we want to run some sort of automated test. We can pull that stuff down out of Git. But that test just ended, and it created our test results file. This test results I think that's a JPL. So I'm going to show you how to view that file. If I just click on it and look at it, not super duper useful. Even if you're in the front row, that's not going to be useful. But show you how to view that real quickly. I'm going to put it here. I'm going to add a listener. Remember, listeners are about reports. So I'll just show you the view results tree, okay? So this was used when we defined the test to capture results. We can also load a file into this guy, and I am going to do that. So I'm going to look for that view results, or test results.jpl. This is the file. If I ran from the command line, this is the report file that was created from the command line. So you can see it looks just the same as it did when I ran through the UI. I got something similar to this, well, probably at this identically. And you can add a number of different listeners here, and they all allow you to open a file in them. And listener. Let's see what else is interesting. I like this aggregate report. So again, I'm going to open up that same test results file and look at an aggregate report. So this kind of shows you that various transactions, average, median, 90%, 95%, that stuff we were looking at before. So this is just a way to view that report that got spit out when I ran through the command line. Okay?
So let me ask you this. So under what circumstances you will be running this test on the command line?
That is a good question, and I'm getting to that. That's coming up. That's coming up. It's going to be in your CI process. Like when you want to automate this into a build, you're going to use this to kick off your test. So this is a Ford Taurus. It is. My mom had a car very much like that. There's also a tool called Taurus that is another way to run from the command line. You can see I went backwards instead of forward. Started to freak out there for a minute. I thought my slides were screwed up. So what is Taurus? Taurus was developed by a company called Jmeter. One of Jmeter's, the point of Jmeter really is they're like a cloud-based performance testing tool. So basically, they're in the cloud and allow you to build load tests and run load tests in a cloud environment. These load tests can require a lot of hardware, a lot of work configuring the setup. This is kind of like an easy way for you to get started, although it costs money, but it's a cloud-based way of running tests. So Jmeter is one of the players in that arena. There's others. We'll talk about those briefly in a minute. But the point of Taurus is it's another way of running from the command line. It's automation friendly. It's free and open source. It supports Jmeter, but it also supports Selenium, Gatling, Grinder. These are Selenium's not performance testing, but Gatling and Grinder are performance test tools, and others. So you can use any tool you want within reason to generate load tests, and then you can run them from the command line using Taurus. You can define your test cases in YAML format. I'm going to show you that quickly. The way you install, now this is going to be a question later on, soon in the presentation. The way you install Taurus is you need Python, and you use pip install bzp. That will install Taurus on your machine, okay? I've already done that. So, what I'm going to do is jump way ahead. So this is to run using Taurus from the command line. And let me just show you this YAML file real quick before I run it. But this is super simplified. There's a lot of parameters you can put in this YAML file. Basically, all I've done is reference my my Jmeter file, and I've overridden some of the concurrent users and stuff like that. There's a lot you can do with this YAML file, basically to override some of the functionality of your Jmeter. So now I'm going to run, basically this is going to run that demo 3 test again from the command line, but this time it's using, excuse me, Taurus. Sorry, excuse me. That's that backspace. I worked on this presentation on a Windows machine and on a Mac, and it caused me some problems sometimes. So this is getting ready to run our test using Taurus. And you'll see, hopefully, so you can see from the command line, now you're getting a little, this is a little bit more interesting than that whole, when we ran Jmeter, like you're getting some statistics. These guys are gonna fill up with some data in a minute, some charts. But all this is from the command line. You're able to see some more details about the test. So this will get interesting. This white bar represents the number of users. So the test is running right now, right? So you can see the number of users. We've got 4 users. One active user, which means one user that's actually doing stuff. This is hits per second. So we're at 11, 12 hits per second. We're still ramping up, I think. Yeah, because we're only at 8 users. We got to get to 10. Yeah, so now we have 10 users. You can see the reason they're not all active is that think time, right? So we have, you do something and you sleep for a second. So even though we have 10 users, they're not all hitting the server, which is a realistic situation. We got 10 logged in users, but only 3 at that moment are request is being processed. You got hits per second, you got response time stuff. You're seeing all the transactions down here on the side. Lots of data there. Test is done. It is going to create, I won't open this report file, but I will point this out real quick. You can see over here on the left, there's a number of, there's every time you run through Taurus, you'll get one of these folders, right? So the one I just ran was 418. That's 718. So just to show you real quick, if you open that up, there's this kpi.jpl. That is the report file. I'm not going to open it. You guys have already seen these reports. But another way of running from the command line. So interesting, maybe, maybe not. Okay.
So basically, you need Taurus to run the test command.
Well, no, you don't. So I showed 2 ways. Jmeter has a way, Taurus has a prettier way. So yeah. So that was Taurus. So we kind of talked about awareness for performance testing. We talked about, showed you some demos with Jmeter. I want to talk briefly about the whole CI/CD process, which basically means instead of manually running these load tests, kicking them off manually, integrating them as part of your whole build process. So maybe on a nightly basis, maybe every time code is merged, you run performance tests. So I want to talk about that. So some definitions: CI, continuous integration. So the concept of continuous integration, probably most of you, all of you know this. Changes are committed frequently. We don't have developers working on the same thing for a week and then there's a ton of merge issues at the end of the sprint. Changes are committed frequently. For each commit, there's a build created, and there's automation tests that run against that build. So hopefully you guys are seeing developers are creating unit tests. Hopefully you have a CI pipeline that runs unit tests. Hopefully you have API tests, again thinking about the test pyramid, so unit tests, API tests, UI tests. These are all functional tests. Performance testing can be included into that whole flow. Now, that whole 8-hour endurance test, that probably is not a great candidate because we don't want an 8-hour test during CI, but some sort of performance test with every build would be a great thing, and maybe nightly performance testing. The goal here is, with all of testing, the goal is to find bugs and to find them quickly. So if we can get this performance testing running more often, sooner, we're going to find problems quicker and they're going to be easier to fix. Continuous delivery is CI, so you have that whole process of doing validation. Plus, you can automatically release the application to production with a click of a button. So what that means is if Terry's a developer and he's doing some development and he merges his code, we run through this whole CI process, validate that none of our tests have failed. Terry hasn't screwed up anything today. at that point in time, once it's gone through that process, it is ready to go to production. We don't need a change control board. We don't have a bunch of meetings. We just need to somebody say, let's go. We know this is good. It's packaged, ready to go, so we can click a button. And then, so I would say, if you think you're doing continuous delivery, but you also say, when we do performance testing later, I would say that's probably not continuous delivery because you're really not ready to deploy until you've done your performance testing, unless you're willing to take risks and maybe situations where performance is not a critical thing. I mean, I'm sure there's situations where that's the case, but on typical enterprise applications, you need to do that performance testing before you deploy, and ideally, to be continuous delivery, you're doing that on a regular basis. And then another definition, continuous deployment means all those things plus, not only are you ready to deploy, but once it passes through all those gates in the pipeline, it actually deploys to production. So Terry's code immediately goes to production after it's passed all the gates and all the tests. So this is the face you may make. I want to talk briefly about Docker. It's not really a specific to performance testing, but I think it's super important to anybody in IT, and I need to learn more about it, and I'm working on that, and I think I just want to go through a couple of quick concepts with Docker. Is everybody familiar with Docker, heard of Docker? Okay, cool. So what is Docker? Docker is a simplifies creating, deploying, and running applications by using containers. So by using a word that's not defined. So the next definition is, what is a container? A container is, kind of think of a container as a virtual machine. You guys know what virtual machines are? Except a container shares the host machine's operating system. There's a lot less overhead with Docker containers, but you can kind of think of it as a virtual machine, a virtual server, but it uses less resources, it comes up quickly, and it's easy to recreate. So Docker containers are created from Docker images, and Docker images are created from a Docker file, which is basically a recipe that says, here's all the things you need to do to build this image. So it's not like a server, like every server can just be destroyed and a new one spun up. We don't get attached to individual servers or individual virtual machines because there's been all this work to get it in the state we need it. This can be spun up through the Docker file. So after you've packaged up the code, it allows you to package up the code and dependencies into one container. Docker vocabulary, I mentioned Docker file. That's kind of the recipe for building a Docker image. A Docker image is a read-only template. So basically it defines what the container is going to look like, but it's not an actual running container. A container is an actual running instance. So there is processes running on that container similar to a virtual machine, similar to a server, same concepts, just a different way of doing it. Finally, Docker registry stores Docker images. So for example, if you want to create a Ubuntu Docker image, there's already one in the Docker Hub that you can leverage. So if you want to build a new container or a new image off of Ubuntu, you have a starting point. You just add what you need. I know that's a little, if you haven't seen this concept before, it's probably not super clear, but maybe think about it and do a little research after. I think it's a super important technology that we probably all can get more familiar with. So Docker file, again, it's a text document. It's a recipe for how to build the image. There's some keywords on there. I'm not going to go through them all right now, but basically I'll mention that one. That defines that base image. I'm actually going to be running, in a second here, I'm going to be running Jenkins, which is a build server that allows you to automate your build process and automate your testing, automate your performance testing. I'm going to be running that from a Docker image that's on my machine. So that kind of made me think, I kind of want to show you guys that real quickly. So the from is the base image, etc. This is a Docker file. This is that recipe file. You'll notice, I'll just talk about the first line. From Jenkins/Jenkins:_LTS. That is going to pull the image from Docker Hub. So there's an existing image with that name that has Jenkins, all the detail, everything I need for Jenkins. I'm going to pull that down. I have a Docker image that can run Jenkins. It's very simple. I don't have to install stuff. If I get a new laptop tomorrow, It doesn't matter. None of that stuff's installed on my machine. I can just spin up another Docker image. A couple other things to point out. That run is running a bunch of stuff that I probably don't need, but then it's also installing Python. And then finally, it's running pip install bzt. Now, why would I do that? What does that do? Taurus.
It's a pipe, right?
Yeah, it's pip actually. Yeah, it's pip, but it's installing Taurus. Remember I showed you Taurus before? So this Docker file is going to create an image that has Jenkins and Taurus on it. And the reason is I'm going to have a build that's going to run that Taurus command line and do automated tests through the build.
So you need to say that the moment the build is deployed, this will automatically kick off.
Yes. Not tonight, but
No,
yeah, that's
saying.
the concept.
No, that is the ideally speaking.
Exactly. So, a couple more Docker things. Like all this stuff's from the command line. There'll be a Docker file in a folder. If I cd to that folder and type docker build -t and I give it a name, it will create an image based on the Docker file in that folder. So to build the image, that's all you got to do. This is launching that image, and I'm going to do that in a second. I'm not going to go through the details of this right now, but basically this is going to run that image. It's going to be an actual live container. And then I'm going to be able to go to a URL and see Jenkins because I'm going to start this container. And I may have already started it. So it's going to be on my machine, port 8080. Okay, I did already start it. So I've already started that container. So you can see, or maybe you can't, but this is localhost 8080. This is all being served out of a Docker container.
Started the build now?
I have not, but I'm getting ready. This is a build that I created beforehand. So I just want to show you. It's pretty simple. This is Jenkins. I don't know if everyone's familiar with this. It's just a way to do a build, to do automated tests. You want to try, where possible, to have your automated tests in the same repository as your actual application that you're testing. I'm just testing that Blaze demo site, so the only thing I have in my code base is the automation code. And I've clicked build now, and I didn't like it. I'm just going to stop that. No reason. I want to show you how it's configured before I run it. So there's basically two steps in this particular build. This first one is pulling all the code down from Git. If you remember, I showed you in Visual Studio Code I had the Jmeter tests, and I had those CSVs all in a folder. That got pushed to a server, GitHub server. So the first thing this build does is pulls that code down. So it's not copying from my machine or anything. I push that code up to GitHub.
Pushing it.
Yes, sir.
You said that you are pulling the code from GitHub.
Yes, sir.
GitHub, right? So GitHub, you mean like from Bitbucket or
Same concept. Same
or
concept.
GitHub is a version to itself.
So let me show you. I think I can show you better than me trying to explain it. So this is GitHub. This is a repository, a Git repository. I have a bunch of stuff in here, but one of the things I have in here somewhere, see that Docker and JMeter? So this is all code that I have pushed up to the central server. This is on the internet. So the build is just pulling that stuff down. That's all it's
So you're
doing.
basically pulling the code from GitHub
Yes.
into
Yes, sir.
Jenkins and doing a build on the front end.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so I had that stuff in Visual Studio Code. I just pushed it up. I didn't just do it. I mean, I've done it earlier. So, but yeah, the build's just going to pull the stuff down from GitHub. So it pulls it down. Then it's got to run it, right? So you can see down here, Taurus tool parameter. If I click this help, execute Taurus with configuration file and options. So basically, this build job is going to pull my code down and run this test, right? Now, I'm going to keep this build off manually. These things can be configured to run on a time basis. They can be configured to run with merges with new code coming in. But the concept is the same. This is a build tool. We're going to run the performance test as part of the build. So with that said, to build it, I just do build now. So this is the console output. So you can see while this thing's running, hopefully you can see like the screen's moving. It's kind of giving me a status on what's going on with the build. So you can see progress. This will run for about 30 seconds. I'm going to jump over and show you one of the completed builds. And actually, if you'll notice over here on the right, this kind of is some of the stuff that comes with Taurus on that plugin. You probably can't see what these labels are, but like at this response time, there's numbers under here, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those reflect all the various builds. So basically, this is a chart of response time over time. So with every build, I can see what my response time was, and I can see something happened here with 6. I haven't researched what happened there, but there was a bump. Response time got worse. In build 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, looks like 10 got better. So this is just a graphical way of viewing your results trends over time. Super useful, much easier than drilling into a bunch of data and trying to pull it into Excel and trying to make sense of it. So again, this is kind of part of that whole Taurus thing. That build is done. I'm going to jump over here and look at it real quick. I'm going to look at a performance report. So again, this stuff should look familiar. These are kind of the same types of reports that we saw when we ran through Jmeter, but now all this stuff is part of the build. Yeah.
How did you get that report? How you were able to get the report?
So I created the build, right? And I had that step that said run. So that's part of the plugin, part of that Taurus.
Oh, okay. What is that plugin?
Yeah, so there's a Taurus plugin that you have to.
So you mean to say that Taurus plugin would display the result display?
Yes. So yeah.
Because there is go back, there is build artifacts, right? The results are stored in the artifact. Right? You go back.
Yeah, here.
Click on the build artifact. That is where the results are stored.
Yeah, right. Yeah, looks like
you are getting this format means the Taurus plugin helps you present the result display.
Right, exactly. So the cool thing about this is a lot of these, like a lot of times you can see this stuff, but you just see that run. So build 13, but this is actually showing trend results over time, which I think is pretty cool. So I just kind of wanted to show you that whole build process and to kind of help you think about how to get stuff into a build that's automated. So you can do performance testing in an automated standpoint every day, every hour, every merge, whatever makes sense. So
basically, you are getting the node tech from the Jenkins.
Absolutely. So that was that demo. I just have a couple other slides. I talked a little bit about Jmeter and hosting, running those tests. There's two options really for running performance tests. You can do it on premises. You can set up all your own hardware and software and manage that. I've seen that done in the past. And there's cloud-based. So there's Jmeter, there's Jmeter, there's Flood. There are a bunch of other ones. I have messed around with Jmeter a bit. Don't know anything about Flood or the other ones, but there's two ways to handle hosting, and those are the two. Here are some links we've talked about tonight: Jmeter, Taurus, Jenkins, Docker Hub, Jmeter, Flood. Links to all that stuff. That's all I got. Is there any questions? Any more questions?
Question on when you run the test in the Jenkins, so I mean you have your performance test, right?
Mm-hmm.
So suppose if I want to run it on, okay, let me try this. Suppose can you run the Jmeter test on the Jenkins? Okay, what I mean is okay. So I have a performance test, a load test. I want to run it on like 20 different servers across the network. So I buy like 20 server dedicated servers to Jmeter.
Yeah.
And I create a scenario on the Jmeter and run the test on 20 servers and it gives me a full Jmeter. But can I run the same test in the Jenkins as like a CI/CD, and have a plugin on top of
Yeah.
it, like Taurus plugin,
Yes.
different tools like that.
Yeah, so first of all, with BlazeMeter, you're not going to buy the servers. You're just going to buy the time. They got all that stuff set up. They got all the servers and infrastructures there. They're going to charge you for the number of runs, the number of users, the number of time. I don't know how they charge, but that's how they're going to charge. Your Jenkins job is going to call out to BlazeMeter and say, run all these
There is
tests.
a BlazeMeter plugin.
Yes.
You have to install BlazeMeter plugin.
Yes. And that is the level of detail I know about it. If you ask me
Yeah,
anything
because
harder,
we have
Terry's
to-
going to have to.
We have to purchase, yeah, you are right, the BlazeMeter will provide the infrastructure.
Yes.
But what happened was, when we were running the test, our optimized servers are blocking the traffic because those, you know, like they are all okay. So they're being blocked. So we wanted to wipe the server.
Sure.
So the BlazeMeter said, this is an expensive server. There are like thousands of them because they have an Azure and you know, all that. Like
Well, you're going to whitelist them on your firewall, right? You're going to say,
we
let's.
have to make it on our firewall.
Right.
But we cannot like install the thousands. So the solution is you have to buy dedicated stuff. That is the reason we
Okay.
are doing money.
So you've used BlazeMeter and you ran into that problem? Is that what
Yes.
you're saying? Okay, well, no, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Again, I played with it, so
Yeah.
I would say take that up with BlazeMeter. That seems like a good way to force people to buy dedicated
So
servers. But,
BlazeMeter, you have to buy, so otherwise what happens is, what they say is your server would block the traffic thinking that it's between hacking the
I
site.
just don't know how they would ever sell their services if, I mean, because most of this stuff runs, a lot of this stuff runs behind the firewall, so you got to be able to let traffic in and all.
Let the traffic in, but okay, so if you are generating thousands of calls for a single server to the machine, then it would think that it is hacking the server to
Sure.
let the traffic in.
Right.
But to wipe the server, there are like thousands of dedicated IPs. I mean, sorry, there are thousands of servers in the BlazeMeter cloud, so you cannot wipe it all. So the solution is you have to buy dedicated IPs. Then there is ended up buying like 30, 40 dedicated IPs. And
Oh, okay, I
of course,
got
you have to buy the virtual user hours as well.
You buy the dedicated right.
Dedicated
Okay.
IPs.
Okay.
Then we whitelisted all the dedicated IPs. Then we bought, 100,000 of user hours. And we have been able to. But now, this is something interesting because I'm just wondering whether we can how the BlazeMeter test to call from the Jenkins. Maybe that I have to find
But I still think you're going to have the same problem because it's still going to be running in BlazeMeter infrastructure and you're still going to have the same blocking issues, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, but I have dedicated IP. Right? So
Oh, yeah. Okay,
so
yeah, right.
only
You
thing
solved
we
that
have
problem.
to figure out the way to run the BlazeMeter test from Jenkins.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
And also that the Jmeter script that you had shown, did you do any correlation in the script?
No, I didn't. And I actually thought about that. So correlation is like you have data that comes in request 1, and you need it in request 2 for the thing to pass. I did not do that because I thought it was a little.
Maybe it's a simple script. It might
Yeah,
work.
it's an important.
Complicated script. You need to do the correlation.
Absolutely, it's a basic feature. I mean, you got to be able to correlate data across
That's
the
not
system.
manually, right?
Right. Yeah. So I didn't show that, but yeah, that's a good point. That's something that's super important. One of the things I didn't show. So, anyone else? Thank you guys for coming.
Thanks, Dennis, for having this. Thanks, Leading Edge, for hosting us and for giving us dinner and beer and everything. If you haven't had any, it's back there for the drive home. Let's see, some upcoming things. Those of you that don't know me, I'm Matthew Aiken. I'm head of the CO Q&A group. We have a meetup next month at Sagetti. It is, let me get the information up on here. Got it in here somewhere. It's going to be Joe Beal, good friend of mine, longtime member of this, longtime member of about every other organization in Central Ohio. He's going to be giving a model-based codeless testing workshop. It's going to be, sounds really interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be hosted by Sagetti up on Cleveland Avenue. We'll be posting it. They haven't given me the details of it yet, but that'll be going up very soon for us. So I'm really excited about that. And as usual, it's free for all. And knowing Sagetti, they always have a good food spread. So they don't have beer, probably not, but they will have a good food spread at least. And they're not as geeky of developers as they are here. If you're interested in Flood, one of the tools that he mentioned, Joe Beal just recently posted a thing in LinkedIn about it. So it's out there. Just go to Joe's LinkedIn site. I'm sure it's all over there for you. A couple other meetups. If you're not a member of the Ministry of Testing in Columbus, they have a meetup next week. Had it up here a second ago. Miss Anna is going here, man. She is testing myths and how to change them, an agile testing strategy. That's up at the HMV Dev Center, just north of where EDJE is. People in Avenue and Polaris just keep on driving through the intersection. They're right up there. And again, the week after that, on May 9th, weeks after that, something like that. Thursday, May 9th, Brian Bear's going in. Yeah. Test-driven development. It sounds great, but how do we do it? Is that the one he did it earlier in the time? Anyways, Brian Bear, great guy. He's going to be doing that. So the Ministry of Testing Columbus is another user group that I strongly recommend you join. Go on to their LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, go on to Meetup. They're on there. I'm sure they've got all kinds of, probably a website, knowing the Ministry of Testing, they're all over the place. So great things coming up. A lot of testing activity here in Central Ohio. A lot of meetups going on. So I encourage you to join as many of these as possible and really get to know the community quite well. That's all I got. Thanks everybody for coming out, and looking forward to seeing you at future meetings. Thanks. Cool.